I know it's still early. It's technically still the spring, but there's one question that could change the trajectory of FAMU's 2025 season. Is the Dark Cloud defense back? Oh, yeah. It's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darrion Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Making Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on X at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. We'll wrap up with a two-part Prairie View A&M conversation. Termaine Jackson had some pretty strict guidelines when it comes to potential recruits, but it's not keeping him from getting big name talent. We'll look at both the guidelines and the players he's pulled in through the portal. But we kick this whole thing off with a question that could not only change the FAMU trajectory in 2025, but it could change the SWAC trajectory as well. And the question is the Dark Cloud defense back? Because if it is, that's a whole different conversation. If the Dark Cloud defense is truly back, you're looking at a defense that could change how we talk about the top of the conference. Because when it was truly the Dark Cloud defense, that was a unit that was suffocating to most teams. You got to think about it. In the early years of FAMU, we're still kind of in the early years, but in the very beginning few years of FAMU in the SWAC, the only team that could beat them was Jackson State. The only team that could beat them with the Willie Simmons at the head coach position, the only team that beat FAMU in this conference was Jackson State. So we're talking an elite team over that 3-year span, right? Anyway, this is what the Dark Cloud defense brings back to you. And I know I mentioned Willie Simmons, and I understand he's an offensive mind. I think he's a great head coach. I think he's a really good offensive mind. Like, I really do respect the heck out of Willie Simmons. So I don't mean any disrespect when I say this. And though he's a talented offensive mind and he's the head coach, when I thought FAMU over those 3 years, I personally thought defense first. I really did. And he was one of the leaders. I thought about him first, but if I'm picking a unit, defense or offense, I thought about the Dark Cloud defense before I thought about the Rack Boys. When you go to individuals, I thought about players like Marquise Bell. I thought about players like Isaiah Land, Isaiah Major, Johnny Chaney, Kendall Bowler, Gentle Hunt, Anthony Dunn. These are the players that came to my mind before most offensive players. Like, yeah, I liked Xavier Smith. He was probably the one guy who I would put in that class. I like Jamari Gassett. I like Jeremy Musa. Like, I like Pruitt. I like some of these guys. Don't get me wrong. Riley, I like some of these guys. But for the most part, I thought defense first. Even with them having dynamic weapons, even with them having an offensive-minded head coach, I thought defense first. If FAMU can get back to that identity under James Colsey, we're talking about a team that when their defense was at their best, they were one of the top 2 teams, if not the best team in the conference every single year. A return to the Dark Cloud defense could equate to a return to FAMU on top. And I don't think that that's hyperbole. I don't think that that is a strong assumption. I really don't. I really don't. I think that if you're looking at where they were last year, they were very pedestrian. Like After 3 years of being the Dark Cloud defense, some of the departures that occurred before last season really took a toll. And you saw them in specific areas, such as the inability to get the quarterback down. If you're able to bounce back, if you're able to get turnovers again, if you're able to get sacks again, then now we're having a conversation about one side of your team being really good. Now the other one just has to hold its own. So when I say that this could change the trajectory of 2025 for the Rattlers and for the SWAC, that's what I mean. Because right now you're looking at two units that are Right now you're looking at an offense that's meh, a defense that's meh. But let's just keep it on the defensive side of the football. In 2024, FAMU was fifth in points per game, fifth in yards per game, seventh in rush defense, and sixth in pass defense. Listen, that's a really average pedestrian, just cool. That's middle of the pack. And for some people, as they're building up, that's okay. But for FAMU, that was a drop off. So when I say that the return of the Dark Cloud defense could equate to the return of FAMU on top, it could give you a dominant unit that allows your offense to not have to score 26 points per game. And that's what you should always want as a defense. Because although they were giving up average yards, average points, they weren't making many game-changing plays. They weren't making many positive plays of their own, such as sacks. They were ninth in the conference in sacks. They were 10th in interceptions. They were, I think, 11th in forced fumbles and 12th in fumbles recovered. So you're looking at a team that, in general, was just cool. Or I think, they were last in forced fumbles. So maybe they were 11th in recoveries. But overall, after years of being a dominant unit, the Dark Cloud defense turned into maybe slight overcast. In 2024, it was a slight overcast. It wasn't nothing too major. It was an average defense that was middle in the pack to below average. And if you can go from being a middle of the pack to below average defense to going back to being dominant, now we're talking about, is FAMU one of the better teams in the conference as well? They still got to solve some problems on offense and whatnot. Got to get quarterback together. You still have things to do. But with a strong defensive unit, the conversation around FAMU absolutely alters. And do they have that? Let's see. Because Coach Cozy said, I don't want to get too high, but I don't, because he was asked, like, is the Dark Cloud defense back? He said, I don't want to get too high, but I don't want to get too low with our football team. I was excited with what I saw. Offensively, defensively, and our special teams did a good job today. And listen, I get it. You don't want to just jump out and you don't want to just say outlandish things that your team has to back up. You don't want to put that out too early. It's the burden of expectation. But at the same time, I was able to see some of the moments from that scrimmage on Saturday. You seen the interceptions, you seen the defense making plays. And I said it, I'm gonna say it again as we begin to just summarize everything that's been going on. The return to the Dark Cloud defense. First off, the fall off for FAMU's defense was completely understandable because look at the names that I mentioned earlier, and guys like Gentle Hunt, Johnny Chaney, and Anthony Dunn are all in that front seven. Here's what James Colsey had to say about that defensive front compared to last season. Colsey says, we're a lot better on the defensive front than we may have been last year. It makes sense. You lost Chaney, Hunt, Dunn, and those were late departures. So you're looking at guys who it was a little bit more difficult to replace in a year. Maybe you just had to wait a season and now you're back. I don't blame you when you lose your most high ceiling pass rusher and now you can't bring down the quarterback. You lose your interior presence. You can't bring down the quarterback. You lose both of your linebackers. Think about it. I talked about this countless times going into the season. And now that we've passed up last year and we're moving on into the upcoming year, right? We're going into 2025. We can look at the improvements that they will make on the defensive front in that front seven. But the departures hurt them the most there, it feels like. You lost Major, you lost Chaney, you lost Hunt, you lost Dunn. That's a lot of players, and expecting to bounce back is difficult with no gap in between. They had the gap. Now can FAMU make good on it? That's what it is. I've said this for a year now. FAMU lost too many players for me to expect them not to take some sort of step back, or for me to have full confidence that they wouldn't take a step back. Okay, now 2024 is over. You lost the Cheneys, you lost the Majors, the Hunts, the Duns. You lost these players, and now you've recouped. Is the Dark Cloud defense back? Because if it is, we're going to have different types of conversations centering FAMU in 2025 than we did in 2024. And quite frankly, if it can truly be the Dark Cloud defense, they may be conversations like we had in 2023 and 2022. But moving forward, we're talking about bringing in new players. Termaine Jackson has a certain set of rules. They're strict rules, and I'm going to break down what they are, how I feel about them, how they were perceived, and everything in between as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Supply House. Get the supplies that you need from the site made for skilled trades. Supply House. Whether you're plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy to use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 40 plus top brands, you'll find exactly what it is that you need delivered quickly from coast to coast as well. So, if you need help with an order, Supply House offers expert support and industry leading service and none of that AI stuff. You're going to talk to a real person. And for me, that means the world because I get to sometimes I don't explain everything the way I want to. I need a couple assumptions made while I speak. AI can't do that. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering HVAC, plumbing, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Use the promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. If you're a second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On NFL Draft. It's the biggest stories around the biggest time of the spring. So make sure you're checking that out. Parsons and Sanchez have you covered. Termaine Jackson made some comments that had people pretty upset last week. And over the weekend, he doubled down, not only saying, I meant everything that I said. If you can't take it, you don't need to be a part of this program. I thought that this was bold. And it's such a layered conversation that we need to be having because Termaine Jackson has a set of rules for all recruits that he is trying to pull in from the transfer portal. Maybe this applies for high school kids as well. I'm not sure, but it does seem to at least one line is directly pointing to transfer portal players. For me, I'm looking at this and I'm going to give you my opinion at the end, but I'm looking at this and I'm looking at the conversations that they have centering this. People are upset. People are going at them. I want to at least give you the rules and the guidelines that were given without any more context. I've already probably given more than I initially desired, but this is called Panther Portal Understanding. 1. When I follow you, this is Termaine Jackson's official Twitter page that he's tweeting this out. So these are his words. These are his expectations. 1. When I follow you, there's a 4-hour window to follow back or we done. 2. Send your number, transcripts, and highlight in the first message. 3. Make sure you address my staff as coach and not bro or by first/last name. 4. Don't ask me for NIL, which we do have, when PFF has you taking less than 200 snaps on a year. You should have gotten your bag from them. Now it's time to play. 5. Pray, talk to your family, girlfriend, dog, or any other people before we offer you, not after you take 80 visits. I'm going to want to know ASAP. We look forward to speaking with you soon. Go Panthers. Okay, that got people up in arms. That got people a little bit upset, and I don't think that they like that he had rules. One thing I will say, sometimes we see people get upset, like, how dare you have standards? I do not believe that is what is happening here. I could be falling victim to the same opinion, though. I want to be very clear and acknowledge where I stand on this because I think that there's multiple layers. I do think people felt his standards were a little bit outrageous. I think that they felt they were a tad bit unfair. I'll elaborate a little bit later, but I did feel as if some of these things weren't fair. That's how I felt about some of these guidelines. But I'm gonna go back through them and talk about them one by one. I did see a bigger school capture this and tweak it a little bit. So I'll say this: he's not that far off. He's not that far off. And I'm not a recruiting specialist. These kids play games. Before I get into anything else, I think this needs to be crystal clear. The reason that these types of guidelines are necessary are because these kids are playing games in the portal and they are stringing teams along. That is happening. If that wasn't happening, I don't think he's doing this. So we do need to acknowledge the cause and effect component of this conversation. It's not as if Termaine Jackson just stepped up and said, I'm Coach Jackson. This is how we run in the ship. I'm sure he's seen some guys who he felt were playing in his face, and that's why he changed the matter, or changed, or not even changed, addressed the matter. But yeah, so his bigger school took it. I don't think it was like a P4. I don't even know if it was G5. It might have just been a bigger FCS school. But here was his comments about it. He says, if that turns you off, you can't play for us. If that turns you off, then August is really going to turn you off. We are going to be in camp almost a month. I'm going to drag you up and down the field. We are going to get ready to go win. That's a process, man. That's brutal. It's ugly. It's confrontational. Not a lot of people want to talk about it. My thing on that, or he says, if you can't handle what we put out there on Twitter about how we operate, how are you going to handle it on 4th and 1 when you got to get off the field because we play football a different way? Again, everybody got to push Control Alt Delete on what they've seen. This is a brand new thing. If you can't handle it, if your mama can't handle it, daddy can't handle it, then certainly how are you going to handle us? So I'd rather you quit now before you get in our program, waste our money, and quit. I don't necessarily understand the connection between a lot of the aspects that he's talking about and what was said, some of the gripes that were said. If I don't like those standards, I don't necessarily think that it should be equated to lack of mental toughness. Now, if you want to say the overall sentiment is we have a tight recruiting guidelines and we run a tight ship, I get that. I just don't think that looking at those rules and saying I like them is the same as being coached a certain way. That's my personal opinion. Obviously, I'm not the expert here. But I just think as I go through them, I'm going to go one by one. A 4-hour window to follow back. I think that that's outrageous. I could be doing anything. I legitimately could be doing anything. And a 4-hour window is outrageous. I would say maybe 2 days. Like maybe. And I feel like I just spitballed that. I didn't practice that before we got up here. But 4 hours is ridiculous to me. Or are we done? Okay. I think that's a little bit much. Send your number, transcript, first message. That's cool. We're not playing around. We here for business. Address my staff as coach. That's respect. Like if you have a problem with those things, yeah, you're going to have a problem because we run our ship a certain way. 2 and 3 are the most valid. 4, I have the biggest problem with probably. Don't ask me for NIL. Hey, man, that's the day and age we're in. And I just don't think that there's a lot of kids who, well, I think a lot of kids are having conversations around NIL because it is important. Like this is important. They're trying to set themselves up for the future. I think asking about NIL and understanding what is available and what is present to them makes sense. I think that's probably my biggest one is that he says don't ask about NIL, which we do have. But I'm trying to secure my future here. And the NIL is part of that conversation. It might not be the entirety of the conversation, but I do believe that discussing NIL figures has become an important part of recruiting. So I don't think that that's fair. And then lastly, he says, do all the conversing that you need with people before we offer you. And here goes, Termaine Jackson wants people who want him. Like Termaine Jackson wants recruits that want to be at PV. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that the way he expresses this expectation is a tad bit troubling. I think that expecting them to follow you back within 4 hours is a tad bit too soon because anything could be going on. Maybe you are a little bit more lenient than you're presenting there, but you're talking about don't go on a bunch of visits. If I'm talking to teams, I should know what my options are. Termaine Jackson wants players that want PV. My thing is, to him, wanting PV means that's my number one option. And I think that's where people begin to say you're being a tad bit unfair and unrealistic. Unrealistic is probably the most appropriate thing, because they are looking, they're exploring their options. Don't talk to me about NIL. Okay. But NIL is security for the future. It's financials. Like, this is the day and age we're in. Knowing what I'm walking into should be part of the business. If I'm a 20-year-old, 21-year-old, I know I didn't get the bag there or whatever, but I just want to know. I need to know these things. It's almost like when people say don't look at the contract. That's almost what it feels like to a certain degree. But hey, it works for PV. They pulled in a couple of players that I think have high ceilings, and I want to break them down, because as much as I can say, oh, then my stance on the tight ship, I love the tight ship. If you're just saying that, hey, we have a strict rules, we have guidelines, you have to be prepared to walk into a real structured environment. If that is the overall sentiment of what you're trying to say, I can go with that. But the specific rules, I'm not a fan of. I think that some of them are limited. I think some of them are unfair. And I think that some of them just really aren't with the times. With the times. Some kids are gonna play with you. That sucks. And I don't even play with you as enjoying the team. They're just gonna play with you mentally. I hate that, but it, I guess it's just the way it is now, so to speak. Um, I just wouldn't clamp down as hard because some kids are not serious. But I want to go through three players that they did get, because, like I said, it works for some people. It works for some people. And we're going to break down those who it did work for as we wrap up today's episode of Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. And listen, it's the NBA playoffs time. Maybe you're in Detroit. Maybe you're in Miami. Maybe you're in Memphis. Golly, Memphis got smacked up. That was bad. That was bad. I think they said it was the worst game one loss we've ever seen in history. But when that series goes back to Memphis, maybe you want to support your Grizzlies. Maybe you want to support the Lakers. I think they may play tonight, if I'm not mistaken. If not tonight, then tomorrow, when they come back for game two after getting blown out themselves. Whatever it is, if you're new to Game Time, you get $20 off. So say you want to go to a playoff game, it's like, it's a little bit out of my budget. Use Locked On College, and now it's right there within your budget. I'm telling you, maybe it's not basketball. Maybe it's the NHL playoffs. Maybe it's the MLB games. Maybe you want to try to buy a ticket to the draft. Maybe you want to go to a ballet. Doesn't matter. Whatever it is, go to Game Time, download it. If it has tickets, download Game Time, create an account, use the code Locked On College, and get $20 off your first purchase. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. We spent segment 2 discussing why I think that some of the Prairie View guidelines are a tad bit unfair, but what I'll tell you what it is, you can't get every player, and you won't get every player that you want. But it's about weeding out the players that you thought you wanted that you actually don't. And there are some players that I think have high upside that did make the move to come to PV. Number 1, Donte Thompson. Number 2, Tevin Camber. No, Tevin Camber. I messed it up because I was trying to say Tevin Carter. Then I'm thinking Tevin Campbell, but it's me trying to talk to you for a minute. And then lastly, Dylan Spencer. And I think that PV has a really good marketing plan. This Panther or this portal pipeline, I love it. I think it looks really good. And we're talking about social media. We're talking about marketing. I thought that Jackson was going to be a tad bit old school. The way he was talking about some of the moments at Valdosta State, I thought he was going to be a tad bit old school. And I don't know what his recruiting was like at Valdosta. I don't. I got to find that out, because he is moving like he is the main attraction. He is. But it worked for these guys. And I think and I find Thompson to be the most fascinating. So in the portal pipeline, it's an album, and every player gets a cover art and they get a song name, a song title. So for Thompson, it was aptly called The Last Ride, or just Last Ride. So appropriate, because for Thompson, he's bounced around a lot. Thompson has bounced around a lot, and he has me the most excited of anybody that they pulled in. But you look at him. Last year, he was at Texas State, played 9 games, registered 5 tackles, 2 for a loss, and 2 breakups. So yeah, he had a little something, but all in all, you're not looking for much out of that. The year prior, he was at Arkansas State. He only played 3 games that year. He ended up redshirting. So that was supposed to be his junior year, but he redshirt, and then last year was a redshirt junior. So you should be looking at him as his final year of eligibility right here. But at Arkansas State, played 3 games, barely played anything, made a tackle. 2024 made a couple of tackles, couple of plays at Texas State, but you're not really looking at that too much. But then in 2022, that's when everything was good. In 2022, he was at Incarnate Word. He was all Southland first team. He was third in the FCS in pass breakups. He had 17 of them. He had 2.5 tackles for a loss, a forced fumble. Well, also, let's just real quick note, 2.5 tackles for a loss here, 2 tackles for a loss last year. You see the ability to be a tad bit disruptive as a defensive back. You're not looking for a lot of that, but it is nice to know it's in the repertoire. But 4 games and multiple pass breakups, you're looking at third in the FCS. It's the last time that he was on the FCS level. What makes Donte Thompson such an interesting get for for Prairie View, is the last time he was on this subdivision, the last time he was here, he was an all-conference player in a pretty respected school. He was a nationally ranked, or he was ranked nationally in pass breakups. So you're looking at him as being very productive, but unfortunately it's 1 year. So now the question becomes, was it a fluke? Was it because you left the FCS? Where is it? Like, who are you today? That's the fascinating thing. That was 2 years ago at this point, going on 3. But then you have Tevin Carter, got it right this time, who was named, or his song title was Throw It Up. Last year, he wasn't doing a lot of throwing it up. He was 2 of 5 in 12 games. Mind you, Tennessee State had Draylon Ellis. So it's not like Tevin Carter was expected to do a lot, but what he did do was on the ground. 30 attempts, 127 yards, 5 touchdowns, had a long of 39. So you're looking at a player who played quarterback, but he did a lot of running. He was a dynamic athlete, and you want to see, is he able to do that as a full-time starter? As a full-time starter, you really want to see if he's able to make those big-time plays with his legs as well as his arm. And then lastly, the last player that I want to break down is a Dylan Spencer. Excuse me, I had a brain fart real quick, but he was a center for Central Arkansas last year, and I thought Blue Bloods did a really good job pointing out that he didn't allow but 1 sack the entirety of his last season at Central Arkansas, and he had nearly 700 snaps, but he just wasn't allowing a lot of sacks, a lot of pressure. And as you have Tevin Carter, this is something that you're going to want to preserve. You're going to want to protect your quarterback. And having a center that you can count on is big. Having a center in a conference where, listen, it's one in the trenches. Not every conference is one in the trenches, but here you're looking at running the football. You're looking at being able to push the offensive line or defensive line back. You're looking to just win that line of scrimmage. And most times, in most teams, you're going to win that. Most games, you're going to win that. But at the same time, in the SWAC, this is what they do. It is. It just is. So getting a reliable defensive back, or excuse me, getting a reliable cornerback, getting a reliable center, and getting a high upside quarterback, PV may have a lot of rules, but doggone it, they are working. I don't know what we're going to be back with tomorrow. I think we're going to be back with our top 10 HBCU prospects. I'm going to talk to Gerald a little bit later on Monday. It's just a matter of sequencing these events. I don't know, but we'll get back to it. In the meantime, in between time, yeah, we'll probably do a top 10. Probably do a top 10 and then talk about the Netflix, or excuse me, the Norfolk State documentary that's going to come out soon. But anyway, that's later down the week. That's tomorrow. That's Tuesday and Wednesday in some capacity. In the meantime, between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care. Stay blessed. Peace.